Adonai rohi lo echsar bino teshe yarbitzeini al mei menuchot yenaleini nafshi yeshovev yancheni memaglei tzedek leman shemo gam ki elech megetz mavet lo irara ki ata imadi shivtecha umishantecha heima yenachamuni taharoch lefanai shulchan neged tzorerai dishanta vashemen roshi kosi revaya Haktov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai v'shavti beveit Adonai leorech yamim Adonai rohi lo echsar. A Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. God guides me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. You are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. My friends, we gather here today to celebrate a life well lived. Just short of 98 years, a blessing it would be for any one of us. Loni Pinns, Leah Bat Shlomo, has left a gaping hole in the hearts of all those who gather here together to mourn, in the hearts and collective memory of the Shari Tikva community, of a time long past, a time whose memory we hold dear and sweet. But as we know, there's a season for everything. L'chol zman ve'et l'chol chafetz tachat hashamayim, et laledet ve'et lamut, et la'tat ve'et la'akor natua. A season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for planting and a time for reaping, a time for keeping and a time for discarding, a time for loving and a time for hating, a time for embracing and a time for refraining, a time for slaying and a time for healing, a time for laughing and a time for weeping, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for speaking and a time for silence, a time for seeking and a time for losing. My last meeting with Loni was just a few weeks ago. It was Erev Rosh Hashanah, and Loni made me cry. I decided that I'd done enough preparation for the high holidays. Anything I didn't know at that point, I wasn't going to know in those last few hours before we lit candles to welcome in this new year. And so I picked up some honey sticks and my shofar, and I went over to visit the seniors in our Shari Tikva community. And when I walked into Loni's apartment with the shofar, she started to glow. She explained to her aide who was there with her that this was one of the holiest objects in our tradition. And all she wanted to do was to touch it. And all she wanted to do was call her aide over to touch it. And I blew the shofar for both of them in that moment. And Loni cried. And her aide cried. And I cried. It was exactly what I needed. It was exactly what we all needed going into this new year. It's appropriate today to think about the shofar. And there are two teachings I want to share in Loni's memory. We are still in the month of Tishrei, just for another day, the month where we celebrate our high holidays of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, where we build our Sukkot and go out and dwell with them, where we dance with the joy of the Torah and Simchat Torah. In fact, when someone passes during this period, we traditionally don't recite eulogies. But if I was going to recite a eulogy today, I would share something along the lines of this. The shofar has a narrow end and has a large end. We sing in Hallel on Sukkot and Hallel on our joyous festivals, Min ha-metzar karati ya va'anani b'merchav ya. We call out to God when we find ourselves in a place of narrowness, and God answers us with width, with breadth. When we feel constrained, we look upon the Holy Blessed One to answer us with space, to be able to expand. There was something going on with Loni the last time I saw her. The last two times I saw her, she was clearly in a place of narrowness. She was in her apartment. She was ready for something else. She had shared with me the time before last that it just seemed like she had lived her life. It was long, thank God. It was joyous. But there was something missing. There wasn't that expanse that I think she was looking for. And I think as I was in her apartment and blowing the shofar, that expanse is exactly what she got, as the sound moved from the narrow space to the wide end of the shofar. We hope and we pray today that in Loni's memory, in Loni's life after her passing, as she enters into the world to come, that she feels that expanse and that embrace. So I stood in her apartment and I blew a tikiyah and a shevarim and a truah and another tikiyah. I also taught this past high holiday season that the tikiyah is what we expect from the sound of a shofar blowing. It's the quintessential shofar sound. But as soon as we blow the first shevarim, literally meaning brokenness, we understand that there's brokenness in the world and there's brokenness within each one of us. By the time we get to the staccato of the truah, we've fallen apart completely. Nothing, no two sounds are connected anymore. But after every truah, just as we go from the narrow end of the shofar to the wide end of the shofar, we go back to a tikiyah. We go back to completeness. We go back to wholeness. Our tradition thinks of this wholeness, this openness, this expanse, as shalom, as peace, as completeness, as wholeness. We refer to one's passing as shalom, as being finally at peace, finally being whole, finally living without pain, living in a world that is all peace. It's my prayer for the soul of Leah Bat Shlomo, for the beautiful soul of Loni Pinns, that she rest in peace, that she experience shalom and shlemut, peace and wholeness, that whatever was missing in this world in her final days, she now be reunited with. She now have that sense of being at peace. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be her will and the will of the divine. Loni was blessed to have nephews and nieces and great nephews and nieces who took such good care of her in her final years. It's my honor to call first upon Alan, her nephew, to share a few words with us this morning.
It's hard to imagine Loni Pinns, this wonderful woman who never had a nasty word to say about anybody, who always had a smile on her face. It's hard to imagine her back in the years when she was born, around when she was born, in the Saargebiet. Now, you might say you thought she was born in Germany. But she never really wanted to admit that she was born in Germany. She said that she was born in the Saargebiet. The Saargebiet was a creation of the Versailles Treaty, which happened about 1 year before she was born. She was born November 30th, 1920. And the Treaty of Versailles was signed June 28th, 1919. So at that point in time, the Saargebiet was created. And the Saargebiet was created to govern the area where Loni Pinns was born, a little town called Niederdorf. And it was governed by the British and the French, not the Germans. And from this point where the Saargebiet got created until 1935, those were the people who determined the fate of the people living in the area. So Loni was born in the Saargebiet, not Germany. Now, she had a tough life in that first 20 years and 5 months that she lived in Germany, or Saargebiet. That was a tough time. I'm going to tell you some stories about that period of time. Now, in the beginning, what happened with the Versailles Treaty is it made it tough for Germany to pay the reparations that they were owed, that they owed the Allied victors. And it led to the rise of Hitler and the difficulties that all the Jews faced during that period of time. In that period of time, her father, Solomon, was a respected man in the community. He was what was known as a fee handler, a cattle dealer. A cattle dealer, he had cattle, he was also a butcher. I visited the town. I saw the butcher shop. And when you take a look at the town, it was a simple life. And he was a smart man. He was in the governing council of Niederdorf. But he realized that when he had a new calf, what happened is that they had a rule that you had to call the veterinarian. The veterinarian had to come out and check the calf. Well, Solomon decided that, it didn't make sense to call the veterinarian every time you had a new calf, because the veterinarian would charge you a fair amount of money. And so he waited and only called the veterinarian for every third calf. Reasonable. But every time he got a ticket, And he paid the ticket. But the ticket was less than the veterinarian was charging. So he built up a ton of tickets. And then as Hitler became more powerful, at one point he decided, I'm going to leave Niederdorf, and I'm going to bring my family, and we're going to go to Metz, over in France. So he applied for citizenship for his family over in France. And the silver lining of that story is that the French decided that he was an undesirable because he had so many tickets, and they wouldn't give him citizenship. If he would have gotten citizenship, he would have moved everybody over to France, and they would have been killed in a very short period of time. That's like one of the 9 lives of Loni Pinns' family over there. At the same time, her brother, Erwin, was crossing over, and he worked in a little town called Bouzonville, right across the way, the border into France. And every day he crossed the border. The border guards knew him, not a problem. But one day when he crossed the border, they asked to see his papers. And out of his wallet came a picture of Hitler that he had marked up with a funny-looking mustache and this and that, obviously making fun of Hitler. Later on that afternoon, the German Gestapo came by their house looking for Erwin. Loni's mother, Elsa, called Erwin, who was at work over in Bouzonville, and said, "Don't come back. Don't come back." And he didn't come back. He went and he joined the French army. So he left. Then my father, Rudy, my father went to school, got a degree, surveying degree. And after he got that degree, he worked back in Niederdorf for a little period of time. But it was tough because he was Jewish. And in fact, they were supposed to put money into a social security fund, but because he was Jewish, they didn't. And when he had the opportunity, he left to come to the United States. And he came to the United States. One of his sole purposes to bring over to the United States the rest of the family, because they were still in Germany. Well, then came a period around 1938. And Aunt Loni went up to visit cousins. They were called affectionately Uncle Herman and Tante Jetta in a town called Siegburg. It was near Bonn. Went up there. And Aunt Loni spent some time up there. And was there till one day, November 9th, 1938. Most of you know that date. That was Kristallnacht. And that morning of Kristallnacht, Aunt Loni woke up to see the synagogue burning, to see the Jewish stores looted, to see broken glass everywhere. And she was up there by herself. Her parents were back in Niederdorf. Her father at the time was 63 years old, and he was sick, so he didn't come along for that visit. And she was worried about him. What was going on back in Niederdorf? What was happening there? And so it didn't take her long to come back to Niederdorf. But it wasn't before Uncle Herman was taken away like many of the other men in the community, and brought to Dachau. So they were all sent to Dachau, and Loni was worried about her dad. She came back to Niederdorf and went to her house, and there was no one there. It was frightening. She was scared. Then she saw someone who said, he's down the street at a relative's house. She breathed a sigh of relief, went there, and there was the family. They were all there. And then they heard about what happened in Niederdorf. There were only 3 Jewish families left there. But those 3 had their windows broken, their stores looted. The same sort of thing that happened in Siegburg happened in Niederdorf, little Niederdorf. And her father was lucky. Again, part of the 9 lives of the family. Father was lucky because he was ill. And the Nazi who was sent to take him away, said, I can't take away a sick man, and left him there. So he lived to see another day. And then they went back to their house, which was on the main street. And Loni went up to see her apartment where she was staying. And there in her bed was a giant rock. If she had been there on Kristallnacht, somebody would have thrown a rock that would have landed on her bed and likely killed her. Another one of the 9 lives that Loni had. Well, the following summer, Loni's father was worried that there was going to be a mass deportation of all the people who lived between the Maginot Line and the Siegfried Line. The Maginot Line was built by the French, the Siegfried Line by the Germans, and Niederdorf was right in the middle. And the Germans had announced that when they marched into Poland, they were going to take all the people and there was going to be a mass exodus. Well, grandfather didn't want that to happen. So he sent Aunt Loni to a town near Aachen, between Aachen and Cologne, called Düren. And they went there, and Aunt Loni was there for a period of time. And she was there with the father's, Solomon's sister, Aunt Eleanor. So Aunt Loni was there for a while, and now they started talking about Theresienstadt. And everybody was worried that they were going to go to Theresienstadt. And right around that same time, Aunt Loni got a letter from our father, Rudy, that said, number 1, that Uncle Irvin, who had joined the army, was nearby. Well, what was going on? It turns out that the Germans would take prisoners of war and they would put them into farms to replace the soldiers, the farmers who would become soldiers. So Uncle Irvin was caught by the Nazis, but he had been given another name. And so they didn't know that he was Jewish. They didn't know that he was from Niederdorf. They treated him just like a prisoner of war. And he was very, very close to where Aunt Loni went in Düren. So she breathed a sigh of relief for Irvin. But then, with all the talk about Theresienstadt, they were worried about when this was going to happen. When were they going to be rounded up? When was that going to happen? And then all of a sudden, they got a note saying that our father had sent money for the whole family to go to Berlin by train, take the train from Berlin to Lisbon, and from Lisbon come to the United States. They couldn't believe how lucky they were. And they took advantage of the opportunity, got on the train, went to Berlin, the whole family, and then went to Lisbon and caught the ship to the United States. And in April 1941, they saw the Statue of Liberty. It was one of the greatest days of Aunt Loni's life.
We'll hear from Loni's nephew, Elliot.
I think you're going to hear from my relatives a lot of stories of how kind and gentle and smiling and nice and beautiful Aunt Loni always was. It befalls upon me to give the contrary view. It's not with pleasure that I do this, but in the interest of being fair and balanced. I don't know if my brothers know this, but she always told me she liked me best. She would always say that I was her favorite nephew. Well, she qualified it a little bit. She said I was our favorite nephew in the house at that time, and I was the only one there. That's what you lawyers call technicalities. But I always felt special. I think everyone who came in contact with Aunt Loni felt special. There was no being sad around her. Like there's no crying in baseball, there was no being sad at Aunt Loni's. You could go in there with a frown, you weren't going to leave until you had a smile on your face. She wouldn't let you be sad. That's how mean she was. This was not kind. I remember as a kid, I would spend weekend mornings at her apartment, and we'd play Chinese checkers. She wouldn't let me win every time. This was not a nice lady, okay? I think she wasn't a big believer in participation trophies. You had to earn things. And I think that there's no better way to practice your skills than Chinese checkers to this day. While I was there, she would foist upon me cream of wheat with brown sugar on it. There are some people in my family that now have a disdain for brown sugar. When they serve grits, what is the natural response? It's to put brown sugar on the grits. Some people turn blue at that thought, but I had brown sugar. And that wasn't the only thing. She was the one who started perhaps the greatest discord that our family has experienced. It's what I call cheesecake wars. My grandmother had cheesecake with a ricotta recipe. It was fantastic. But Aunt Loni had a cheesecake recipe with cream cheese. Shavuot would come every year, and the great debate would ensue. With my physique, you can see, I had to participate over and over and over again. That debate still rages, and I still succumb. When I was in high school, and I took chemistry class or math class, and I had a question, it was a dilemma what to do. And these days, when kids have a question, what do? They haul one of these things out, they ask Dr. Google what the answer is. In those days, people went to a place called the library. They had things back then besides e-books and computers at the library. They had things called books, and you'd have to do research. That was like the long version. What I did, I used the Cliff Notes version. I went to Aunt Loni, and she would walk across the hall to Uncle Murray's apartment. Uncle Murray was a NASA chemist, and he knew everything. How did I pass high school chemistry? It was Aunt Loni, because she was such a pest that she would pester Uncle Murray constantly with my queries. Kept pestering until he married her. That's how mean she could be. We would go on trips, and I would come back all excited and describe to her the places that I visited. And yet, she would take all the fun out of that trip because she remembered my trip better than I did, and she wasn't even on the trip. She had traveled everywhere. I think she went to all 193 countries that are in the UN. She seemed to be a walking travelogue. And this was no more apparent than the time we went on a cruise to Bermuda. I'd be walking down the street, and I hear this noise, this chirping sound, and I thought they were crickets. Aunt Loni proceeded to tell me that these are tree frogs. Tree frogs? Who the heck ever heard of tree frogs? I don't know anything. She was a walking encyclopedia herself. She knew everything. For not having an advanced education degree, I think all of my siblings would recognize that she was the smartest of her siblings. We would go and see the flowering bushes. She would know what's a bougainvillea. I thought that was bouzonville. I didn't know what bougainvillea was. Oleander. All these things she knew. And how humble she made me feel that she knew everything. That's not a nice lady. She could make me feel like an idiot. It still isn't hard to do that, but she excelled at that. I think that, as the rabbi says, everyone has a little bit of brokenness in them, and that was what she had. She would make everyone feel like they were not up to her level because she set the bar so high. I wish to hear from all of you later. I want to thank you all for coming and honoring her this way. I want to thank my brothers, especially David, who took such great care of her over the years. He's still trying to make amends for going to that school up north, but I forgive him. I hope that my children and grandchildren will have as big a mean streak in them as Aunt Loni demonstrated to me. Thank you.
Now invite great nephew Ian, also speaking on behalf of his sister Andrea.
Yeah, I have some words that I'd like to say about Aunt Loni in remembrance, but before I do that, I want to read some words that my sister Andrea has provided. She unfortunately couldn't be here today as she lives in London right now, and it was a long trip, but she is grieving with us all today, and I just want to read some words that she has first. These are her words, not mine. Aunt Loni always had a smile on her face, countless amounts of love to give, and a good joke or catchphrase to share. She never took things too seriously, and maybe that's the magic potion we should all drink to also live to the ripe age of 98. It could allow us to do just that. Halloween is coming up in a few weeks, and I'll always remember my favorite and easily most embarrassing costume was that of Daisy Duck to match my brother Ian's Donald Duck that we wore courtesy of Aunt Loni's sewing skills. I sadly didn't inherit her sewing prowess, but I know what costumes our boy/girl twins will be wearing this year in honor of her. I'm sure all my cousins will agree that she treated us more like her own grandchildren than great nieces and nephews, and she'll be missed dearly. Andrea. And I think Andrea is spot on here because I have the same memories of Aunt Loni as well. And, she was always, very easy to talk to. She was approachable, respectful, down to earth. I mean, she was just, as I remember, an all-around great individual. And I remember one time when I was living in Cleveland, she invited me over for dinner once at her house. And I accidentally locked my car with the key still inside. And I, was expecting to, probably wait around a few hours for, service to come and allow me to, get back in my car and drive home. But, unexpectedly, Loni let me stay the night at her place. She didn't make me have to wait for AAA or someone else to come. And even though it was unexpected for me, maybe I shouldn't have been surprised, given that I was talking to Loni and I was at her house. And I could say so many nice things about Loni, and you'll hear a lot about her today, all these nice things as you're currently hearing. But she just had that special spirit about her that my sister and I both remember so well. Whenever I would come to Cleveland and visit my grandmother and grandfather, Aunt Loni would always have my family at her house for brunch, and she made such great dishes. And if I had only half of her cooking skills, I would be eating much better than I am right now. But I don't have that, unfortunately, so I have to make do. But that's but besides her sewing, which she of course was very good at, and my sister mentioned that, she was good at just so many other things as well. And I living to 98, I honestly never thought that she would die. But alas, here we are today, and I'll miss you, Loni.
Welcome Ian and Andrea's cousin Randy to share a few words.
Aunt Loni didn't just love her family. Oh, sorry. Wrong page. That was for you. Start up. From the day I was born, Aunt Loni and I had a special connection. You see, I was almost born in Aunt Loni's house. It was Memorial Day, and the entire family was gathered for brunch at Aunt Loni's, which, at least so I'm told, was quickly cut short when my mom Lisa went into labor and raced to the hospital. But what a special way to be brought into this world, surrounded by family in the home of one of the most caring, loving people I've had the pleasure of knowing. Over the years, Aunt Loni continued to serve as a bedrock in my life. She and my grandmother were the only close family members in Cleveland, but what they lacked in numbers, they made up for in love and support. She didn't just attend my school plays, she made the costumes for them. She didn't just come to my bat mitzvah, she made my talis bag with those sewing skills that Ian just mentioned, and made homemade chocolates for every guest. She was always the first to invite us to dinner, to volunteer to watch my dog Cody when we went out of town, to go above and beyond in whatever ways she could. Aunt Loni didn't just love her family, she defined herself by it. Everyone I knew, both family and friends, called her Aunt Loni, whether she was her aunt or not. I even asked recently, only half-jokingly, whether the staff at her assisted living facility called her Aunt Loni too. Aunt Loni relished her role as an aunt and wanted everyone to know that she was not just Loni, she was Aunt Loni. Until the day she passed away, Aunt Loni made sure that first and foremost, we knew how much she loved us. My parents, my brother Eric, and I went to visit her about a week ago, the last time I saw her before she passed away. We had a festive, wonderful lunch outside in the sukkah, and she repeatedly told us how proud she was of us and how much she loved the family. The next day, however, she was unfortunately having a hard time breathing and speaking, and her medicine made her a bit out of it. But when she realized we were in the room, her eyes lit up, and she mouthed the words, "I love you." They were the last words I'd ever hear her say. But in the end, what else is there? We love you too, Aunt Loni. We love you too.
David, please.
That's great, Randy. I just want to make sure I got my pages in order. A toast to family. Those were the words Aunt Loni uttered every time we joined together for a meal in the final year of her long and well-lived life. Aunt Loni's life revolved around family from the day she was born until the day she died. As you heard, Loni was eternally grateful to my father, Rudy, for arranging and paying the passage to America for her and her parents. She was eternally grateful to the last day of her life when she says, "I love you." Loni continued to be grateful to all her family and dear friends who came to visit her. She appreciated the visits from Alan, Elliot, and their families, as well as from Miriam, her European niece, and the visits from dear friends, Diane Loveman, Arlene Lombardi, Marion Gruen, Jackie Chernin, Joel and Julie Falk, they came, Dorothy Green, so many. She loved seeing Rhoda and Jerry Jacobs for Shabbat dinner. She loved the visits from Joanne and Steve Grossman and looked forward to seeing Eli and Dorothy from Philadelphia, who came just to see her. Lisa's parents and sister always made it a point to visit her when they were in town. She looked forward to Lisa and me taking her out for weekly Sunday dinners. There were so many special people in her life, and I apologize for not naming them all, but I don't think we want to be here all day. There's a baseball game later as well. Why did all those people want to include Loni in their lives? There's many, many reasons. One has to look at just Facebook to see the comments people have left about Loni after she passed away. She was a gentle, kind soul, a kind and loving person, happy and sweet, a jewel, always kind to me, a delightful woman. She always exhibited a sparkle of warmth and showed loving kindness and had a wonderful sense of humor. Loni was always quick with a pun and quick with a laugh. She used to comment that she married the perfect man, Uncle Murray, a NASA scientist who you heard about. Not only were she and Murray a wonderful couple who enjoyed traveling, photography, and making puns together, but she always marveled at being able to marry someone with the last name of Pinns. What name could be better for a seamstress? Unfortunately, that marriage lasted only 6 years when Uncle Murray passed away from a heart attack way back in 1967. But let's get back to Loni's sense of humor. I just wanted to tell a couple of quick vignettes that illustrate that part of Loni. One story from many years ago and one story from the last 3 months. Years ago, some of you who are native Clevelanders will recall a sportscaster named Jim Grainer. Jim Grainer was on TV, and while not a sports fan, Loni knew a little about football, a little about baseball. And you know what they say, a little knowledge sometimes can be a dangerous thing. Well, she sees Jim Grainer on a Monday at a local dry cleaners following a Browns game. And she goes up to him. She says with a straight face, "I saw the Browns game yesterday, and what I just don't understand is all the players were fighting over the same ball. Why don't the officials just give everyone a ball?" Loni said Jim Grainer was speechless and then just laughed. Only sweet, innocent Loni could get away with this, and I'm sure it was a very precious moment. She loved to tell that story. Then, more recently, when I would take Loni to her doctor's appointments, inevitably, the doctor or the nurse would come in and say, "Now I want to take your blood pressure." Instantly, she would respond, "Where are you going to take it? Don't take it too far." This is a woman at 97 years old. While I loved my parents dearly, my brothers might also agree they were not, I wouldn't say they have an awesome sense of humor. I am pretty confident that my brothers and I came by our senses of humor more from Aunt Loni than from our parents. There's an ongoing debate whether sense of humor is developed from nature or nurture. I think Aunt Loni was a testament that providing all of us with this gift makes a strong argument for the nurture argument. Aunt Loni was loved by people because she was one of the most caring and thoughtful people you'd ever want to know. I just returned from South Carolina, where I saw lifelong friends Karen and Rick Dale. Karen revealed that Loni had given them a ceramic asparagus-shaped serving dish she had made for them for their wedding, which was over 40 years ago, despite Loni not being invited to the wedding. But Loni knew them and just felt it was the right thing to do. Karen was so impressed that she is now taking up making ceramics herself and has become quite accomplished in the field. Loni's legacy lives on. Aunt Loni had many hobbies and activities she participated in throughout her life. She loved classical music and attending concerts at Severance Hall, going to the Holden Arboretum, North Chagrin, She enjoyed travel, enameling, and ceramics, and knitting, and loved playing Scrabble, Mahjong, and doing jigsaw puzzles and Chinese checkers. One year for Hanukkah, when I was a kid, I thought I would give Aunt Loni a jigsaw puzzle. What a perfect gift. So I went to Spencer's Gifts at Richmond Mall, and there was the perfect jigsaw puzzle for Aunt Loni. So I bought Miss November, 1974, who had been cut up in 250 pieces, and gave it to her. I'm convinced she loved it. I can still hear her laugh when she opened it. At least she didn't have the heart to tell me otherwise. And I loved going there and doing that jigsaw puzzle. Aunt Loni was such an instrumental part of our family. She liked to say that her favorite Saturday nights were when she got to babysit for me. I'm sure she loved babysitting for Elliot and Alan too, but she told me that she loved babysitting for me more. We never had the need for a tailor, as Aunt Loni would always be happy to shorten a sleeve for me or let out a hem for Elliot or Alan. She also, as you heard, enjoyed making Halloween costumes for our kids, for Ian and for Andrea, Aaron and Alex. She lovingly made countless costumes for Randy's elementary school plays. Her days as a seamstress at Bloomfield's, Higbee's, and Dillard's served us well. Later, as Eric and Randy got older, they loved the candy that she made for all the tables at their bar and bat mitzvahs. They so looked forward to going to her house for dinner and enjoying the wonderful roast beef, homemade French fries, and chocolate roll. Aunt Loni took a lot of pride in making a perfect medium rare roast beef. But it used to drive her crazy that when she would make the roast beef and invite my mother to dinner, inevitably, my mother was late. She was notorious for always being late. And this caused the roast beef to sit in the oven for an extra 15 minutes. And what had been the perfect medium rare roast beef was now a medium well roast beef. But Aunt Loni got smart. She started telling my mom that dinner was going to be at 6 o'clock. Everybody else was told dinner's at 6:15. My aunt was a smart woman. Everybody showed up at 6:15. My mom 15 minutes late, she thought. But the roast beef came out perfect every time. A wise lady was Aunt Loni. Aunt Loni was always generous with a kind word. Jan Lindner, who's sitting here, who provided unbelievable loving and devoted care to Loni for this past year and tirelessly worked 12 hours a day for 6 consecutive weeks, had perhaps the most telling comment. She said to me, "I have no need for any more compliments in my life. I've received a lifetime of compliments from Aunt Loni." What a tribute. So it is often said that we hope after one's death the deceased memory becomes a blessing. With Aunt Loni, those memories not only are a blessing, but are treasures. So I end as I began, with a figurative toast to all the treasures Aunt Loni has left us. May her memory be a blessing and a treasure. Let us say amen.
Amen. And there you have it. In just a few short weeks, we'll mark the 80th commemoration of Kristallnacht. We can't imagine in our day and age such brokenness and such destruction. And yet out of such brokenness and such destruction came such joy, such beauty, such love, such wholeness, and now such peace. Invite us all to rise as we recite our memorial prayer for the soul of Leah Bat Shlomo. Eloha Selichot, Chanun V'Rachum, Erech Apayim V'Rav Chesed, Hamtzei Chaparat Pesha V'Akravat Yesha, ומנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה. במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת לאה בת שלמה, שהלכה לעולמה. אנא בעל הרחמים, זכרה לה לטובה כל זכיותיה וצדקותיה בארצות החיים, ופתח לה שערי צדק ואורה, שערי חמלה וחנינה. בסתר כנפיך הסתיריה לעולמים, וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתה. אדוני הוא נחלתה, ותנוח בשלום על משכבה, ונאמר אמן. Eloha Slichot, God of forgiveness, you who are gracious and compassionate, patient and abundantly kind, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Loni Pinns, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that you remember all the worthy and righteous deeds she performed. May our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace. And we say, Amen. You may be seated. The mysteries of life and death are beyond human understanding. We are perplexed and overwhelmed when pain and anguish befall those whom we love. In sorrow confronted by death, which has taken Loni from our midst, we feel our frailty. Like morning dew, we glisten for an hour or two and disappear into a new day. Roe Yisrael, shepherd of Israel, guide us, your flock, with love and compassion. And if in our grief and desolation we grow distant, do not abandon us, but draw us closer to you. Grant solace and comfort to those who mourn. May they sustain each other with blessing of memory, the memory of the life of their beloved Aunt Loni. In the valley of the shadow of death, beside the still waters and the green pastures, you, God, are our shepherd. Be our strength, our shield, our guide, and be our comfort throughout all of our days. And we say, Amen. Our interment will follow now at Zion Memorial Park Cemetery. Following the interment, Shiva will be at the home of David and Lisa Michael, 5050 Crofton Avenue in Solon, from after the burial until 9 p.m. this evening. Contributions are suggested to Congregation Shari Tikva, which can be made at sharitikva.org. Invite us to all please rise and our pallbearers to come forward.